May 19, 2012. This is Justice Done Dirt Cheap. Just going to show you the biker's perspective along the side of the roadway. Today I'm going to talk about the law, the evolution of the law, and how there's many things that we take for granted, as in we don't question where these laws came from. Are they laws? Are we bound by them? Why? When? Things like that. What's interesting is, as an example, a driver's license is a concept that has evolved from a commercial endeavor. See, people have the common law right to travel from point A to point B. You don't have to pay for that privilege. You have it. You don't have to ask permission, because we're supposed to be free to be able to make choices. We're supposed to be free to be able to choose to travel from point A to point B. Now, if you think about that, the average man or woman with a car travels to work in the morning, travels home in the evening, then maybe on the weekend picks up some groceries, does a few little run around things, and that's it. It's very little use on the road, and the use is done by a car, which is usually fairly small. It's not heavy. It doesn't wear on the roads. Now, the alternative to that, on the other hand, you have companies like UPS who have big, heavy trucks that are traveling 18 hours a day. Transport trucks, they're getting paid to transport supplies from one point to the other. And then you're getting paid to do that. So the difference between driving and traveling is that one has the common law right to travel from point A to point B without any license, registration, or needing permission whatsoever. It's reasonable that if someone, on the other hand, is endeavoring commercially to make money, they're profiting by the use of the public highways and byways, then they should contribute to the maintenance and upkeep of those highways and byways. And that's where we come to license, registration, and fees. Now, the term driver comes from the days of horseback, when people freely traveled by horseback. It didn't cost anything. One did not need a license to travel by horseback. They just did. On the other hand, people were paid to drive cattle, as in they were paid to move a herd of cattle from one point to another. They're not doing it as an exercise of the right to travel. They're doing it because they're getting paid to do that. Hence, driving cattle and driver's license. That's where the word developed from. The appropriate term driver would apply to a taxi cab driver who is commercially operating a vehicle, charging passengers a fee to get them from point A to point B. That's a commercial endeavor. Hence, a cab driver is in fact a driver. But if someone is just transporting themselves from point A to point B for pleasure or recreation, there's no need to have driver's license, registration, or any of that stuff. People forget that it wasn't that long ago when no one had driver's license or registration. 100 years ago, very few people had cars. They were mostly electric cars, and they didn't even think of why would they have to register their car or pay for the use of their car. That was completely foreign to them at the time. Yet today, people have grown up in a society where they think it's always been this way, when it hasn't. It has not. And we need to claim our power back, our power of self-direction, our ability to choose our own destiny, and to have the discretion to choose among equally viable choices. Now, there's people in Canada right now who have deregistered their vehicles, and they are traveling from one point to the other. And what they do is they put an identifying plate on their vehicle so that the vehicle can be identified, but they do not actually register the car, and they do not have a government license plate on it. Now, this is done through the claim of right process, where one claims the right to travel freely without paying fees for commercial use of the highways and byways. But you won't find that on the news. The powers that be do not want us to realize how free we can actually be. They'd rather we went along and paid a mountain of fees. Now, what's interesting is at some point there's a decision where somebody said, okay, we're going to send these commercial licensing fees to everyone, and let's just see who pays. Someone made a moral decision to do that. An anti-moral decision against what we would consider common morals. They basically just mailed out to everyone a notice that they had to pay a commercial registration fee. And people went along with it. What's interesting is in law, if you consent to something, you're agreeing with it. And all people had to do was say no. I'm sure many people did. And after a few years, more and more people did it. And now it's become part of the common culture in Canada that people think they need to have driver's license, registration, and insurance in their vehicle. There are groups who have created insurance collectives where they get 1,000 people who all pay a few $100 collectively. They'd have $1 million amongst them. And you think, well, that was only $1 million. And I say, yes. When's the last time you were in an accident that cost $1 million? Collectively, the group shares the loss and they pay in when necessary. Instead of paying thousands of dollars a year to an insurance company for 20, 30 years and getting no return, these people pay in once or twice or a few times and they'd have insurance for 30 years. See the difference? Right now, the insurance scheme is set up so that private companies make a lot of money. Monopolizing on the risk that one is subject to when they travel by vehicle. The other thing is that people don't realize is when one registers their vehicle, they're actually granting ownership to the government of Canada, the provincial government. They're basically signing over the ownership. Once they sign over the ownership, the government does not want to be responsible for the loss or damage from that vehicle going about the world. So they can say, well, since you signed it over to us, we're going to make you get insurance and pay for it to cover any loss or damages. The trick is, if one has the original certificate of origin, it's like the one could equate it to like a birth certificate for the vehicle, then there's no need to register your vehicle. So there's the thought for today regarding registration ownership, and we really should question the laws we take for granted, look into them and see where they really come from and do they really apply to us. Alright, thanks for watching. It's just done dirt cheap. Have a good day. And Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada.